Hello, English 112 students. I made a handout of the narrative arc, and I mentioned this in a lecture, I think, the other day, but I wanted to explain it a little bit more to you and what all the elements are. The narrative arc is important because that is how most of our stories are told. Even some stories play with time, and they still kind of follow this idea of setting the scene, of the rising action, of a climax, of a resolution, and a conclusion. And you notice that it's not like a parabola that you would have in mathematics. In other words, this end doesn't match this end. But I'll tell you how that works in just a minute. So the first thing stories do is set the scene. Who is here? Who are we? Who is the narrator? What's happening? Where is this place? What's it like? The next thing is the rising action. Rising action is a conflict. In every story, there's a conflict, which essentially is the character wants or needs something. And that is the idea of the rising action, that it's this conflict is coming about. As the action rises, it rises to a climax. And this is the turning point in the story. This is not necessarily the point in the story that has the most action, but it is the point where things start to turn around. But you notice the story doesn't end here. The narrative arc isn't a narrative slope, right? A slope would be from here to here, and it ends at the climax, the end. It has to resolve itself. Hence, we have the resolution. And the resolution is more than just something like, oh, I learned that Mr. Rochester really isn't such a bad guy, and I'm going to be his wonderful wife, and the end. No, there are a whole bunch of circumstances that lead to the end. The end is very rarely ever just the end. And even if it seems like it, there's still, if you analyze the story very carefully, there's going to be things that lead up to a conclusion. And the loose ends are tied up in this resolution, often fairly slowly, and then it comes to an ending. If any of you have read The Road by Cormac McCarthy or seen the movie, it doesn't really have a standard ending. They find some other people, they find a body of water, but yet nothing is solved. But does that mean it's not a conclusion? No. They have gotten there through a course of action, and there was a turning point in the novel which led naturally to this place. And even though it isn't the end of the story, it's the end of this part of the story. So even that can be a conclusion. So in this little inset here, I notice sometimes you can see my cursor and sometimes you can't. I said the narrative arc is a story structure that's so common, some scholars suggest our brains are hardwired to expect stories to follow this pattern. And even in like movies like Pulp Fiction that play with time, conceivably the movie starts at the end of the movie. But if you take a close look at that film, it still follows the narrative pattern, or the narrative arc, even though there are variations in the time and the writer plays with it. Steven Spielberg once said that great films or great works of art are an old story told in a new way, or a new story told in an old way. And I'd argue that most of them are the latter. So I hope that's helpful in helping you understand more about story structure.